In 2008, the financial world didn't collapse all at once. It cracked quietly. At first, almost no one noticed. There were no alarms, no emergency broadcasts, no single moment that told people something irreversible had begun. Life looked normal. People woke up early, they went to work, they paid their bills, and they trusted something they never questioned: the system. For years, that system had felt safe. Home prices kept rising. Banks reported record profits. Investments that once seemed risky became ordinary. Buying a house wasn't just about living somewhere anymore. It became a strategy, a decision that seemed impossible to regret, because prices didn't fall, they only rose. That belief spread quietly, and it changed behavior. People bought homes larger than they needed. Loans became easier to get. Approval became faster, not because risk disappeared, but because it was no longer visible. Banks weren't focused on whether borrowers could repay. They were focused on something else: speed, how fast they could create more loans. Because they didn't plan to keep the risk, they planned to move it. And they did. Debt was bundled, packaged, sold, then sold again. With every step, it moved farther away from the original borrower, farther away from reality. Ownership became unclear, responsibility became diluted, and confidence replaced caution, which made the system look stronger than it actually was. But risk doesn't disappear. It waits. The first signs were small: missed payments, delayed foreclosures, homes that stayed on the market longer than expected. Nothing dramatic, nothing that suggested collapse, until something subtle changed. Doubt. Banks began asking a dangerous question: what exactly do we own? The answer wasn't clear. Assets once labeled safe became uncertain, and uncertainty spreads faster than panic. Because panic requires confirmation, uncertainty only requires suspicion. Banks stopped trusting each other. Lending slowed, then stopped. Credit, the invisible force that allowed businesses to operate, disappeared, almost overnight. And once trust disappears, systems fail quickly. At first, the consequences were invisible. Then, they were everywhere. Banks collapsed, markets plunged, savings evaporated. Millions of people lost their jobs. Millions lost their homes. Companies that had existed for decades vanished. Not because everything was gone, but because confidence was gone. And confidence is what keeps systems alive. What began as a financial disruption became something personal. Empty houses, closed businesses, interrupted lives. Panic finally arrived. But by then, the collapse was already in motion. Governments intervened, not to save everyone, but to prevent total system failure. Major financial institutions were rescued because allowing them to fail would have triggered something worse: systemic collapse. But most people received no rescue. They absorbed the damage directly. Careers stalled, plans disappeared, stability dissolved. And something deeper changed. Trust, the belief that stability was predictable, began to weaken. The traditional path, work, save, build, secure, no longer felt guaranteed. On paper, the crisis ended. Markets recovered. charts improved. But psychological damage doesn't follow market timelines. For many, the sense of security never fully returned, because they had learned something permanent. Stability isn't constant, it's conditional, and it depends on systems few people truly understand. The 2008 crisis wasn't caused by one decision or one person. It emerged from thousands of reasonable decisions that made sense individually but created fragility collectively. That's what makes financial crises dangerous. They don't begin with obvious failure. They begin with confidence, with rising charts, with normal life. And maybe the most unsettling truth is this: by the time collapse becomes visible, it's already too late to stop it. Because collapse doesn't arrive as chaos, it arrives disguised as stability.